Welcome, everybody, to part two of Tartarian Mysteries Revealed. Are we the new Tartarians? I am Rob Yox of Full Spectrum Universe, and with me, as always, is Joan of Angels. Joan of Angels, how are you today?
I am fantastic. We are diving into my most favorite subject, Tartarian history, Tartarian mysteries, and how to reclaim our lost past. So, yes, I'm really happy today to be continuing our discussion.
I'm ecstatic. And if you guys are watching on either Full Spectrum Universe or Joan of Angels YouTube channel, like, share, and subscribe. It is important that we take this information and seed it across the world to give people a better understanding of who, what, why, and where they came from. And really, like we say all the time, a man or a woman who doesn't know where they come from is a man or woman lost. And we want to help you find that place. And that's one of the objectives of diving into these mysteries and trying to reveal what we've come across during the time studying it. So, with that being said, Joan, do you have anything else you want to add before we dive in?
My life's work is helping everyone remember who we are, why we're here, so that we can actually choose the timeline and the pathway of ascension. So, freedom, ascension, remembering who we are, having our optimum life. And that's why I do this work with Rob.
Amazing.
We're a good
Amazing.
team.
We are a good team, and I love doing that kind of work too. I think it's truly indicative of what our sole purposes and our contracts were when we came into this incarnation. So, we're going to dive right into this one. So the last one we talked about the different types of tribes that came with Tartaria, and we're going to go back to the beginnings of those tribes and where they began. Now, it could be anywhere. We're going to reference a couple places. Whether that's the truth or not is not in question. It's the timeline in which this happens and how it happens. And what we're seeing is a consistent cycle that is happening again today. So, first thing I want to say is that we all know that Tartaria was in it, they say the late 19th century. That's not true. But it was its own country, its own flag, its own government. It had its own maps, and it covered most of the modern world as we know it today. And yet, somehow, ever so quietly, they incorporate this entire span of time into Russian history. Now, whether that's the case or not, we don't know. And some of the other countries are involved, but they like to pack this together. So, the first thing I want to talk about is Tartaria Muscovite. It was the biggest country in the world, covering 3 million square miles. And Tartary appears to be one country that was split into areas like Petit Tartaria, Eastern Tartaria, Russian Tartaria, Muscovite Tartaria, Chinese Tartaria, and Mongol Tartaria. Now, there's more than that, but these are the main focus ones because they're the biggest ones. And these are the ones that cover the most circumference on the map when we look at it. So we know before that the Romanovs or the Romans, and we'll explain why they're called that, tried to invade Tartaria at some point. Now, this Romanov or Roman is only emblematic of that new world order. So we can call it whatever we want. Doesn't matter. Like we said, we can put this into a bunch of different cultures. We're going to call them the Romanovs, but truly, it's the new world order and that reset that we were talking about before. So Moscow Tartaria was conquered by the Romanovs, and the Romanovs basically had a capital that was super close to the Moscow Tartarian capital. Now we can call it Moscow. There's, parts like St. Petersburg, but in the 18th century, the border of Moscow Tartaria was very close to actual Moscow. And it was in such dangerous proximity that it concerned the Romanovs. And it's possible that it was the reason that this so called leader, Peter the Great, to make the decision to relocate the capital further away in St. Petersburg to the swampy coasts of the Gulf of Finland. Now, we know St. Petersburg is way north, and that's right into Tartaria territory. The north was where Tartaria was kind of built. So here they placed the New World Order capital. St. Petersburg was a location of the covenant for the Romanovs, and the capital was far away from the Honduran Tartaria known as the Great Horde. And throughout the history books, we see the Russians referred to as the Great Horde. A lot of different bodies would come in and say, we're going up against a great horde, which was the Russian people. But truly, it was the Tartarian people that were the great horde. Dr. Joan, you have anything you want to say
But
up to that
now
point?
the Tartarians, but were really though not the Mongols, right? Or they are.
Well, I believe that the Mongols were just a sect of the Tartarians. So the Great Horde has been known as the Mongols, but also as the Russians. The Russians during the Middle Ages were classified the Great Horde before the Mongols took, or Mongol Tartaria took a large swath of Asia and encompassing all the way down into the Middle East.
So the Mongols, though, that I understand, were also a barbaric race. So is this maybe that they were not this barbaric race, that they went out and they controlled and took over all sorts of sects in Asia at the time,
What
or
we
like
see in
units.
history with Genghis Khan was that he would absorb these tribes and let them practice their beliefs within those tribes. That when they went to crown a golden city of the Mongol Empire, it had many a temple of different types of religious backgrounds, different types of faith involved. They never truly stripped away the fundamentals of those societies. They wanted them to be together as like city states in this greater empire that would give tribute to the Mongols themselves.
So that is a very Tartarian principle,
Very
to
much so.
that everyone can practice their own religion, their own philosophy, their own life, and that's also a difference then between the Tartarian benevolent old world order versus the new world order, or the controllers then that sought to destroy and force then one way of living or one world order upon the communities that they absorbed.
Absolutely. It's just
So that's a
another
big
tether.
difference.
It's
Hmm.
another tether back to totalitarian fundamental culture, which is you give more than you take, and you don't classify yourself as somebody who has an overabundance of something. You give back to those people who are helping prominate you to this type of intellectual grandiosity, or even in wealth or any aspect. And this is really where I see a lot of these similarities, and a lot of our religions are based in this aspect of Tartaria, saying, well, you need to give 51% and not take as much for yourself. You take the 49 and you give the 51. Therefore, you're in good standing with whatever that higher power is. And we see this, and it makes me glow a little bit, because I know the information that I'm coming across is more Tartarian than we would think. And this is also why I keep portraying that we are the new Tartarians, because now these faith-based religions have gone in and become super corrupt, but the people who are a part of it are not always the corrupt ones. It's that the world order at the top of that new world order, or that custodian of that sort of that belief that is trying to garner the power, the wealth, but the people are ultimately following this credo of giving back more than taking. And that's sort of what we do in the spiritual community too. We kind of really try and help others before we help ourselves. And of course, sometimes we have to help ourselves to help others. But your goal ultimately is to give back to the community with whatever you find, whether it be knowledge, whether it be support, or it blends. It all There's a lot of gray area here where there's this connection to this cyclistic nature, and the powers that be don't like that. They don't want you helping each other. They don't want you there to prominate the people over the power of the small and that few, that group. So, I mean, it's incredible.
Right. And they don't want you to have access to any information or true history or true knowledge. Or look at how they've been censoring these days and taking books, people offline, arresting people for speaking truth that doesn't go along with their agenda. So they absolutely do not want you to know about your history or about this history of the Tartarians and how and what an advanced civilization they were. And again, I think we mentioned in the last video, they were very, very well educated. They had really superior skills. Also, they were breatharians. We should also mention that. The buildings that they lived in indicate that there were no bathrooms. Now you have these immense, gorgeous, outstanding places that they lived in that were also generating electricity, but you don't find any bathrooms, you don't find any kitchens, you don't find any ways of feeding themselves. So they were actually more than human. They had some other skills. They were extremely ascended, probably living in a more fifth dimensional frequency because they could connect directly to source. They were connecting directly to energy, that Tesla free energy there. And they were living in cities that were producing harmony, health, and happiness. It is tragic. I want to go back to these cities. I want to be able to take a trip back in time, Rob, to really experience this. One of the other things that I read is that when you go back and you look at the influence of the Black Tartarians and the Black Tartarians in America, we think that the Black race was brought here from Africa during the slave trade, but apparently that's not really the truth. And I think I sent you a little information about that. But apparently the black population is indigenous to America, as well as the Native Americans, the Red Indian. We usually say that they're not the result of blending the Indians with the Europeans. They are completely their own race, but they were born here. They are part of the first Native Americans were Mongolian Tartarians. Melville Hershkovitz, a European anthropologist, was one of the originators of the out of Africa theory without any proof. Okay, they wanted us to believe that they were imported in here because when you count out the number of slave voyages that they made, they did not make enough slave trips on the ships. They didn't even have enough ships big enough to take something like 10 million that they claim we brought over. No, they were here. So that was another lie that is being exposed now.
Absolutely. And not to say that there wasn't caveats to that information that some may have come that way, but majority did not. They were here already, and it goes to show that the encompassing Tartarian culture was of all races, all colors, all creeds. It was a way of life. And you're right, that breatharian is very important because if they did eat, which they found minimal crops were grown, they figured out a way to be so efficient with digestion that there was no waste left over and there was no plumbing. None of that stuff was incorporated into these towns and cities. And
Right.
that is incredible. That goes back to genetics too. And you said you wish you could go back in time, Dr. Joan, but
I
I
do.
want to tell you we're breathing life into new Tartaria right now. So that future is upon us. And hopefully we'll be here to help cultivate with that information what we saw as something so spectacular can be again. And there's
I love
nothing
that.
stopping us from making it happen again.
I love that. As soon as we sort of become free and unpinned. I also want to mention, Rob, again, that there were millions and they even think maybe tens of billions of Tartarians on the planet at that time. And it wasn't considered overpopulated at all. And the way you can tell that is that when you look at these earlier photographs, and we should probably find them and show them to everyone, but you could see these cities were built for millions of people, not the few 100,000 that was what they said the global population was at the time. See, they don't think we have time to actually check the details of what they're telling us. So they have actually found millions of bones buried under the cities, and in the massive insane asylums where they imprisoned all the adult Tartars after they separated them from their children who were sold for slave labor, and they were shipped on these orphan trains. So they have found huge crematoriums and large graveyards under these buildings.
There's a
So,
reason for that. The reason why they were using crematoriums and things like that is because we're going to show you a picture right now. If you saw the bones of somebody that big in the ground, it would
right.
make you question everything, everything. And that is part of the reason why, there, and not to go crazy, but we can go back to Native American culture where it talks about they used to put food or some sort of treasure into these caves so that the giants would walk into the cave and they would set fire to the cave until that giant starved, which is where the Smithsonian found these gigantic bones that they have in the basement of giants in North America, which again points to Tartarians in North America yet again.
You have to wonder why at any time, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there's records from different towns and villages all through America. They had to keep a historical record every year. And you'll see, like 1895, there was a group of giant bones that were found, huge human skeleton, and they'd be sent immediately. Smithsonian Institute would send someone over, and they would take all the remains back to the Smithsonian Institute, never, ever, ever, ever to be seen the light of day. And I had a boyfriend who was a museum director. He said they'll never be seen. They are not allowed humanity, and they've destroyed most of them, so they can't be seen, just like they destroyed the books, just like they destroyed statues, just like they flash froze all of those giants and those titans that we now see as mountaintops. So, or cut down the giant trees. Look at that picture. That picture blows me away. That is a giant hand of some kind of being that's dead. Also reminds
Wild.
me of that book that I liked that was The Journey. It'll come back to me. Gulliver's Travels.
Oh,
He
yes,
talks
yes.
about going to the land of the giants and the land of the little people. And that's another deep dive we're going to do down the road with those lands of the giants and lands of the little people, because I think I know where those are. But that's down the road. You're going to
Yeah,
stick with us till we get
that's going
there.
to be so good, though. I'm so excited for that because we've been talking about it between me and you, and it's just so epic, so
And,
epic.
and in that picture you showed, Rob, we should look at how well dressed the people are.
Hmm.
They're very, very, so there's a difference in the population that we can see when we look at some of like 1906 in San Francisco, where the people just look like they're in rags and they look impoverished in a certain way with their little wagons, horse-drawn wagons, and yet they're next to the Palace of Fine Arts, which is such an exquisite ancient Tartarian building. So there are some scholars that have also said that the 1906 fire in San Francisco was to completely destroy all those old buildings, that actually that might have been the old Rome.
Wow.
If we understand that we're living in a time where we actually don't know what time we're living in. The only thing we can say is it's the time where Rob and I are talking together right now. That's all I know. We don't know a thing about where we are in time or place at all. It could be a figment of someone's imagination because of the way we are. Someone's controlling it all. So we haven't gotten to see the real impact. I
That
think,
could very well be the case when they switched over from 13 months or the extra months to a Gregorian calendar. We lost track of everything before that, time wise. And who's to say that the first peoples even classified time? So we don't know how long they were even there. And
you know,
again,
we, right.
we go back to the carbon dating and all those different types of dating things, and they're literally built on a logical fallacy. So there's nothing that incorporates time for really looking at when was the 1800s? We could say it was 100 years ago, but who made that 100 years? You're right. It's definitely the figment of somebody's imagination. They're
Right?
using mathematics to specifically alter what we knew as history.
Right. And like even things that are hard to conceive of. There's evidence that they had electricity in their palaces 700 years ago.
Hmm.
Okay, there's evidence in the early 1800s before we had electric cars, possibly. There's evidence of electric cars in the 1800s in different places around the United States. There's evidence of buildings powered by light. But what happens is we might look at something and then we're told not to question. So, and then we don't because people are busy, living. This is a survival planet for people. This is a harsh reality. They took away the the magnificence of the planet, its ability to be a Garden of Eden to support every human on the planet. And by splintering us in that way, they've actually devastated and made it a very harsh reality. So people do not have time to indulge in this kind of research that we're doing, Rob. So I really appreciate that we're working together. I appreciate that everyone's tuning into this and is just as excited as we are to uncover reality because there's something off, in our psyches because of this.
I completely agree. And, just to try and come back to a little bit of the evidence before we finish up today, I want to go over a little bit of where, when I talk about the Romanovs and I tell you that they're the Romans, I don't want you to take my word for it. I want to show you the lineage that breeds from the Romans. So the Romanov family was the last imperial dynasty to rule Russia. And again, we're lumping everything back into Russia, and this is where they want you to stay. So keep thinking outside of that box. They first came to power in 1613, and over the next 3 centuries, 18 Romanovs took the Russian throne, including Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, Alexander the First, and Nicholas the Second. And you're probably asking yourself, Rob, why are you telling us about this if you don't really know exactly when that happened? Because those names can be put to reference to find these little niches in the history, or the little weak points in the chainmail that you can dive deeper on, and you can figure out exactly who these people were, what part of class they were, whether it was the for the greater good of the people or that ruling class. And I asked the question again: why are they called the Romanovs? And it's because during the reign of Ivan the Terrible, the former family became known as the Yakovlev, Alexander Herzon among them, whereas that means the grandchildren of Rome, or of Roman Yurovich Zakharin Yurev, changed the name to Romanov in tribute to Rome later on, so that they could use the Romans as their allies. So, you know, again, what they do is they take these terms and they use these terms to kind of stamp out what it meant to be Tartarian. So we talked about the horde before, whether it was the Mongolian or the Russian horde. And we look at terms today like hoarding, and that means to take more than you need, which was completely against the Tartarian mantra, which is give back more than you take. So now they're outside people, again, are labeling these people as the horde,
To
taking
be
more than
afraid
they
of.
needed, to be seen as barbarians. But themselves, they talked about themselves in the endonym, which is the Tartarian, right? So,
Now I
and
understand.
right, go ahead.
Now I understand. It's exactly the opposite then. They were not hordes. They were not invaders, is what you're explaining here,
Yes, yes,
as opposed to being pictured in those ways. Hmm.
and that's what they want you to think, because when we get back into this now, there is a case of an invasion of the Siberian American horde. Now, if we're looking at the history books, and we're looking at the 16th century, America is not supposed to exist. It's not supposed to be there in their writings because they supposedly don't know about it. And they labeled these people with these specific titles because there is knowledge of America at that time. And one of the people that the Romanovs faced against was the Pugachevs. And now we're getting into this Russian history, but the Pugachevs were supposedly the peasant uprising, this violent peasant uprising that essentially were the Tartarians, but now they're calling them peasants again to denominate what these people truly were. And the Romanovs were having help from all these different cultures that were trying to capitulate the Tartarians. And what they did is they took these opportunities to destroy Tartarian towns and cities and settlements. So the Pugachev are defeated and then they're exiled as convicts even further into Siberia, the Far East, the east coast of the Pacific Ocean, the Scotland Islands, which is in the Pacific, which would be Polynesian, and Moscow Tartaria spanned from the Urals to Siberia to Central Asia to the Far East to Alaska and North America. So now the Pugachevs are the Moscow Tartarians, and they're being thrust, just pushed as far east as they can go, which lands them into America
Right.
as refugees. And some of the areas in America that were ruled by the Moscow Tartarians were now given to the Romanovs. So now they're further exiled from the west coast of the United States into the middles of the country, into the middle of North America, which is soon become part of Manifest Destiny and sold between the French, the English, and all the rest of it. And they portray this Hollywood like a Hollywood movie in the books, in these textbooks. And it really was a conglomeration of Native Americans and Tartarians and how they lived together and they rebuilt that society to be so amazing. But the technological side of it kind of died down when the spiritual side was taking hold because a lot of these people integrated and then again got defeated and sold as slaves or labor, children sold and taken from their families. So now we see that there is from two different sides, Tartarian people made their way into the United States. And that's how why I believe you don't have to, but I believe that there are genetics inside all of us that lead back to Tartaria, which is why, again, we are the new Tartarians.
Very interesting. My family left Russia, left Ukraine outside of Kiev, small town outside of Kiev, in 1906 or 1903, something like that, after a pogrom. They were Jewish, and the Russian peasants and the Polish peasants would run through Russia and round up all the Jewish population and slaughter them. And it's very, very interesting. My family survived because they put the kids in the oven and they hid the children in the oven from the hordes. But then the family came over here. So I'm thinking, my goodness, they came with a lot of people from their towns. They were pushed here, obviously, from what you're saying,
Well,
is
not
what
only
I
that,
surmise for
they
that.
went
A lot
from
of the
Tartarian
immigration.
roots and were brought back to a place that actually had Tartarian roots as well. Sort of like their minds knew to go to the new world because there was more of their lineage there than so expected, and that could have been divine intervention. It could have been the good side of things, trying to position them against the adversaries. Because if that didn't happen, you wouldn't be here now
Right.
exploring this information.
Like we all are. Right. And again, this I'm still odd that we're waking up. That there's those of us who are really starting to question the lies and the misinformation, even in our movies, our films, our books, our music, all designed to split us up and to take away any memory. And so all we have is sometimes old libraries that still have old pictures, and it would be fun to get in the Vatican, right, and get under that library,
Oh
have
man.
access to where they do still have records of the planet. Anyway, Rob, this is really profound. So I think we should end on this note that we were scattered. Wait, wasn't there a story about the Tower of Babel was destroyed and people scattered across the globe? Wait a minute. I think this is a recurring theme of humanity being somehow scattered across the globe.
I agree. And we can go into ancient texts that are prominent today that show that Tartaria was there, the peoples were talked about, and it's ubiquitous across all the cultures because they all had contact. And again, we're seeing that they're trying to do something like this today just to bring it home.
Right.
This information is important because it shows that these resets have happened, but people and the culture and the information have survived. Now, at the time, maybe they didn't see it coming as much as we do now. So we are in a bit of a different position than they were. But knowing the motives, the ways in which these people operated, I'm talking about the controllers or the custodians, we now see that the lay of the land, and it gives us the ability to hampen and be that virus to those people and not let them do it again for the 700th time in our in the the span of history that classifies humanity.
So we're like one of those viruses that could shut your computer down.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
If the
yeah.
New World Order is really based on, especially based on AI technology, then as we as humanity are that unexplained factor, where they, right, we are an unexplained factor because they can't determine our outcome because we have free will. And so many of you are standing up and taking back your power, and we're creating this vision of where we're going. And so I do believe that there will be the kind of cosmic reset, the cosmic event that will actually shift humanity into this higher consciousness, but we still have to thrive and get through the next few years where the attack will be greater. And so, even in talking about the flu epidemic in the early 1900s, one of the things I discovered is that the population that was most decimated were the middle age, were people like 30s to 50s, the ones that were the healthiest and that were not expected to be taken out by a flu and never had been before, which tells us that that was also targeted, just like it's being targeted nowadays. So be frosty, guys. Use your discernment and start to say, what is true? What is really going on here about everything?
I couldn't have said that better myself. It's just we're on that cusp, and I think that that's an amazing place to end. And we're going to get into so much more of what Tartaria is and was, and what it will be, and that is the true prolificness of this subject, is that it spans the here, the now, the then, and the to come. So buckle up. Let's keep going. Let's do this.
And keep asking those questions, like what if the our known civilization's only 1,000 years old? Okay, what if there really were mud floods a couple hundred years ago across America? What if this is all true? What does that really mean? But we do know that something's askew. And we do know that there's an agenda right now that's kind of similar to what happened before. So we just want to leave you with that. And that there's really a lot of hope and room for optimism once we wake up. This is part of waking up.
Absolutely. So we will see all of you new Tartarians later.
Oh, but I also want to remind you guys, please like and subscribe and share our YouTube channels so we can reach more people so that we can get this word out. And, come and visit my website and Joan of Angels and Rob's work, and stay in touch with us so we can hear what's on your mind and we can start really honing in on not just the issue and the problem, but the solution.
Exactly. Leave the comments below. Fill it up. Let's talk about it because you people are the driving force for what we're doing this for. So we want to hear your take on what you've heard so far and what more you want to see going into the future, because we can just keep going. And, it doesn't have to stop at Tartaria. And Tartaria branches off to many different cultures and places and peoples, and we could just keep going. So just let us know. And yeah, this is a great place to just end this one. We've hit a lot of information in these two parts, a lot to digest. Listen to it again. Make sure you try and figure out some of what you're seeing and go deeper for yourselves, because we want to hear your take on it too. It's not just our information, it's our information, which is everybody. And we all have a take, and we all have a part to play in the coming days and months, and making sure that we don't hit this reset again. So just super grateful, and love all of you so much.
So fun to be with all of you, and just so healing to have a tribe of people that are just, feeling and looking into new realities here with us. So thank you so much. We'll see you all next time.